Wraith the Oblivion is a depressing, unplayable, unbalanced atrocity in game design that has the sole purpose of encouraging abusive bullying behaviours at the table. It's something I would say if I was a fucking idiot or got all my World of Darkness lore and advice from Reddit posts. If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Lore by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we begin the Lore by Night How to Wraith series, a mini-series that aims to improve the role-playing of players and storytellers during tabletop sessions. This episode will focus on portraying the standard Wraith. I think it's fair to say that Wraith the Oblivion is the most popular World of Darkness game that nobody plays. More often than not, I see people speak of Wraith with high regard in terms of its writing, but are unable to take the next step and play the game for one reason or another, and I'm going to address these four culprits right now. First, some people think it encourages bullying with the shadow mechanic, which on a surface level to an ignorant ass makes sense. It gaslights the player, the psyche, to say and do things that takes them out of the driver's seat for some time, but when you actually read the books, it is quick to see that this is stupid when you consider that all World of Darkness books, including Wraith, discourage this sort of attitude and actually encourages a healthy discussion and consent at the table, long before conservative neckbeards started pissing themselves at the sight of those scary consent sheets. Ooh, ooh. If you are willing to play a game with someone you cannot trust because they constantly push things too far and are just an asshole, then that is a you problem as much as it is a them problem. Anything that bad happens is solely on you for being an irresponsible player. Secondly, many people think that Wraith is an unplayable game, including some of World of Darkness authors I have spoken to. I do not know where they came up with this idea or why this continues to perpetuate, but that is just straight up fucking wrong. I have run and played in many games of Wraith with success, most of which being with other people who have had next to no experience with Wraith. Moving on. The third point is one that I am willing to understand a bit more. Many don't want to focus on a game that is so entrenched with death. It's traumatic to all those around, from relatives, loved ones, friends, and heaven forbid, anyone who witnesses the passing murder, suicide, or tragic accident. No amount of session zero discussion can 100% prevent trauma from resurfacing with no notice, so I appreciate that Wraith is not a game for everyone. However, where I struggle to comprehend the lack of willingness to approach death is with the most hardcore Vampire the Masquerade players. Putting that aside, by very definition, vampires are the walking dead, fueled on blood, and they, the players, won't touch anything else with a barge pole. I have run and played Vampire with many people over the last few years, from those who have had no experience playing, to those who have been playing since first edition, to Twitter micro-celebrities, and TTRPG personalities, and influencers, and I've even had the privilege to run Vampire for some of its authors and developers, and well, y'all need fucking therapy. I have been exposed to many torturous traumatic embraces and barely disguised fetishes and kinks, horrific murders, and in one particular case, a human trafficking incident gone wrong, and that still makes me feel very ill to this day. So I do not believe that Vampire players, and to the lesser extent any World of Darkness player, cannot be gently eased into Wraith. The fourth and final point is going to be the focus of not just this episode, but this entire series. What do you do in Wraith? On the one hand, it is quite an easy question to answer. It has lots of lore and interesting geography, factions and political upheaval, so all you have to do is decide with your group and ST what you want to focus on and have the ST dictate to you what the overall theme is, playing up and down the things you love and hate, and would you fucking look at that? I have just described every TTRPG experience, from Dungeons & Dragons, to Traveller, to Call of Cthulhu, to Cyberpunk, to Mage the role-playing game, to Vampire the fucking Masquerade. But I don't think that is the question people actually mean when they ask that. What they want to say is, how do I play Wraith? And I don't mean the mechanics. I did a guide on that already, which will appear in a card right about now. But understanding what makes Wraith Wraith. If I wasn't clear enough, Wraith the Oblivion has you kill your character. You're dead. Hooray! Death, of course, does not mean that it is an end or that you have failed, something that is very important to highlight, for it will be a recurring theme for this episode, and indeed, the series as a whole. Remember when I said there were 4 culprits? I lied, they're 5. Despite its name, Wraith is not a game about meeting Oblivion. Similar to how vampire uphold their Masquerade, mages ascend and werewolves fight the apocalypse, you are in most games of Wraith staving off the calls of Oblivion. Your existence as a Wraith is proof of this. What you have is a second chance to put the rights to your wrongs or not. There is no humanity tracker or renown to keep you in check, just your shadow and angst, but that is for another time. You can do something meaningful, both subjectively good or bad. Subjective is key, as everything in Wraith is a dirty grey, but you do something, proving to everyone around you, particularly that of Oblivion, that your existence matters. Let's rewind a little bit and think about the character concept. In my How to Vampire episode, How to Make Awesome and Believable Characters, we talked about what would go into making, well, awesome and believable characters, but 2 things will jut out at you immediately. You're dead and your characters lived a full mortal life. As a Wraith, your life is usually cut short somehow. Regardless of age, it has a beginning, middle and end, and they are not going to reach their prime. They are dead, and now they exist as a Wraith and have to act on how that makes them feel. Give some thought about what they were like as a child, teen and adult, if they got that far, of course. It isn't needed to write massive theses on ages 1 to 10, but just start on 3 to 5 points per age bracket. Child, teen, adult should be more than plenty. If that's too much, do less, but give some depth and think of how they will fit within the rest of the circle the other Wraith should be playing with, but more on that later. When you have some backstory assembled, have a look at the life and regret portions of the character sheet, particularly the latter. Everyone has regrets, things they wish they could change or do differently, which is likely to feed into the creation of your patters and maybe your fetters, but probably the former. The life box is more straightforward. Most games would call this the concept box. Of course, the caveat here is that you cannot be what you were as a mortal now that you are dead, but it is certainly going to affect your outlook and interaction with everything around you and the world you struggle to interact with. The questions presented in the character creation chapters of the core books, 1st edition, 2nd edition and 20th anniversary edition, aren't there to patronise people, but to develop the mortal concepts, turning good character concepts into great ones. Yes, more often than not you began as a mortal. Within the world of darkness, 99.9% of Wraiths were mortal humans. Even as a vampiric ghoul or guru kinfolk, you are still a mortal and unassuming human. For most, this is already a turn-off. Why would I want to start as something less than a supernatural badass on the get-go? Because it is relatable. We can only imagine what happens in a gunfight or what it feels to have your head torn off, but such imaginations have probably gone through the media fillers, i.e. TV shows, films and video games. Now, that isn't to say that you can't and shouldn't make a character whose death was brought about by a void engineer who filled you with lead before having your head torn off by a werewolf, but what your Wraith feels are human emotions. Again, so do the supernatural splats, but Wraiths remember what it means to be human, and the loss of said humanity now has a profound effect on how they view the world, and that is before you consider how the death sight of a Wraith paints all this grey and decayed. It is easier to relate to Wraiths because they are defined by their mortal self, and the emotions that prevent them from transcending, binding them to the underworld, which makes up the Wraith's passions. This differs massively from Vampire, Werewolf and Mages players, where the focus does tend to shift very quickly on what powers I can use to get my own way and seize control, with personality taking a back burner. Yes, Wraiths have their own powers too, the Arcanoi, but those are not mutations in the blood, the result of study or a loan from spirits. They are part of a Wraith and the corporeal makeup, suggesting and coursing rather than dominating and taking, for the most part. Consider that when assembling your character sheet, why does your Wraith have access to these Arcanoi? What does this say about them as a person in view of the world, both shadow and skin lands? Don't think about Legion or Guild affiliation, think about you, the player, and your character. Another reason you should focus more on the mortal during character creation is that mortals play a more vital role in Wraith than other World of Darkness games, for they are a key component to your access to the living, the skin lands. Family and lovers are in total disarray now that you're gone, or maybe they celebrate. Why? The cop you hated in life now becomes an unexpected ally as he investigates who killed you. Or what about that hot chick that's moving into your old home, now a haunt, and is converting it into the scene of her next crime? The best horror stories, in my opinion, are best found with ordinary humans who are presented with something they cannot properly define, where the investigation becomes the story, which is often the focus of storyteller system games. So you filled out your character sheet, filling in them dots and squares representing their strengths and weaknesses, fleshed out the Wraith specific themes, and you're just one step closer to playing a Wraith Chronicle with your friends. The first thing you all should do is play out the prelude, taking snapshots of their mortal life that leads them up to the eventual abrupt end. 20th Anniversary Edition even has the Crucible scene idea on page 281, where you focus solely on those final tragic moments that some players may hand-wave at this notion, especially if the time they have to play is so precious. But if you care about the setting, your character, the other Wraiths in the group and their shadows, as well as turning a good concept into a great one, or have a great one into an amazing one, etc., based role players will want to spend one session or part of one developing their character concepts and challenging and changing what didn't work before through a prelude. You could play each other's prelude individually with the rest of the players participating as NPCs or watching, or having them all die in the same accident, or a mixture of the two. Congratulations, you are now a Wraith. Now what the fuck do you do? Repeating something I said earlier on, now in more helpful form, everyone is going to be sitting around the table, physical or digital, talking about what they like about Wraith. Someone may really like the concept of the Doomslayers and wants to explore the labyrinth. Another may wish to join a guild, another the Legion that claimed them upon death, and someone maybe want to go all heretical on your asses. Some STs unfamiliar with Wraith may find this a logistic nightmare if they are used to their other World of Darkness players singing the same tunes, but Wraith's freeform nature actually encourages players to do this, and you should embrace it. The essence of the game revolves around individual interests and the many forms of conflict. Of course, there are consequences for actions. The hierarchy-aligned Wraith would probably not take too kindly to a member of the Circle joining the truly forbidden Nemonis Guild, for example, but let's not get too entrenched with the lore and other background mechanics for now. What I recommend, especially for newer players and storytellers, is have the group go through their first moments of Wraith together. The first moments of the Wraiths should be traumatic. Note I said Wraiths, not the players. They are removed from a weird substance, their Carl, that is removed by someone called a Reaper. If the Wraiths are lucky, it is a nice, careful and understanding soul that will gently walk the new infants through their existence and present them a shared haunt with a favour or payment in return. If not, the Reaper or multiple Reapers chain the circle up for the highest bidder or straight into a soul forge. Both approaches offer very different moments of realization, both offering different horror experiences. It is also possible to do away with removing the coal altogether. A couple of early Wraith introductory adventures have the Wraiths recently deceased awake in an unknown location, not getting any ceremony with it, for lack of a better word, weigh and slow down the narrative. Regardless, the Circle will have to become acclimatized to the Shadowlands itself, the ghostly neighbour to the Skinlands, divided by the Shroud. Life sight and death sight make the world appear drastically different to the Wraith. This should be overwhelming, and it's normal for a new Wraith to feel dazed as they try to process the flood of new sensory information. My autistic listeners should be able to understand this already. Then the Shadow should creep into play, a new personal horror unique to the Wraiths of the World of Darkness. Without going into too much detail for now, but the Wraith is a part of you and knows as much as you do. In those early waking moments, it knows what it is, but you do not. It has to learn the gifts as you do. In more poetic words, it finds its voice as you make your first steps across the underworld, and I recommend storytellers to keep this in mind in introducing the Shadow for the first time in your first Wraith session with the budding infants. Some would recommend not introducing the Shadow at all during this opening moment, but when you have the weird moment of introducing an integral part of Wraith at a later point, if it works for you, awesome, go for it. Once the first session and misadventure are out of the way, the storyteller should begin to expand what was discussed in the personal session 0, drip feeding in the lore and world as they see fit, as well as making the Circle what their passions and fetters are, which could cause for some spicy moments if Wraiths sharing particular fetters or have passions connecting or contradicting each other. This gives the Circle things to work for, to prove their worth within the Shadowland, their own personal light within the abyssal black. Wraith the Oblivion is definitely a game with some very strong depressive themes, but it is also a game where hope fuels the Wraith to do what they gotta do to reach the light, and achieving those goals does not necessarily mean you strive for transcendence. That is the ultimate goal, one that is achieved through a much higher plane of thinking and personal enlightenment. No, not like fucking Golconda, not everything has to do with vampire. What I mean is that your own personal struggles as a Wraith are a constant fight against the shadow to take control and turn you into a spectre or yeet you into the mouth of oblivion. It is the small amount of light that makes the darkness so bleak, after all. To conclude properly, I wish to state two things. First of all, everything I've just presented to you is my own opinion. At the end of the day, you can do whatever you want to do. As long as everyone is having fun and feeling that particular unique horror, you are interpreting it all correctly. The other thing I wish to reinforce is that I've only presented a mere portion of my knowledge and takes on tonight's topic. Why would I give you all my secrets? Trick question, I fucking wouldn't. I can reveal, however, that all my knowledge comes from the book, so go and read them if you want to learn more. Again, it is not needed to enjoy the game, but if you want to develop your character concept within the grander lore, go and legally purchase the books and read them. To be kept updated, follow the Lore by Night VTM Instagram and Blue Sky pages to find out when we upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.